Good morning. All right, you guys can hear me?
Rabbi, I hear you.
Yeah, good, great. Today is a math day. With the help of Hashem, we are learning ERUVIN Daf Pei Gimel. We began yesterday to discuss the machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika and Rabbi Shimon regarding the size of a loaf of bread. We're going to review these shiurim in a moment, when we will continuously learn, mamish throughout Shas, whenever we speak about tumas eichalin, whether food themselves need a minimum share to acquire tuma. That's a machlokes Rashi Tosfos, that's a machlokes Rishonim. L'kula alma, food needs a minimum share in order for it to be able to impart tuma. And whenever we learn the sugya, we give the share of one egg. Today, ERUVIN Daf Pei Gimel, we will see that this is actually subject to a machlokes Tanoim, and the share of one egg, Benegeya Tumas Eichalin, is following the shita of Rabbi Shimon. Now we paskin like Rabbi Shimon, but it's gavaldik to know that it's really subject to a machlokes Tanoim. We're going to see in our Gemara regarding the share of a sa'a. Now a sa'a is comprised out of 6 kavim. We mentioned yesterday that every kav has in it 24 eggs, which is why we said a half a kav is 6 eggs. That was the shir, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika, of Michael, of 2 meals, mazin shtei seudos. Now, Nachamal, if mazin shtei seudos is 6 eggs, so a kav is double 24 eggs. A sa'a has in it 6 kavim, so a sa'a really used to in the midbar hold 144 eggs. That was the volume size of a sa'a, but we will see that there were times that we learned this a few times together already, as we will, God willing, in the future, that because of inflation, what they did is that they increased twice over a long period of time the sizes of the shiurim. A sa'a became larger, a sa'a later became even larger, and we will learn how Rebbe had even the largest size of a saw. Ultimately, he measured a saw of holding 217 eggs, and we'll see how we get to that number. We will also learn on ERUVIN Daf Pei Gimel the shiur to be mafresh challah. Even today, when challah is midrabanan, there is a shiur of if you make a dough with less of the shiur challah, you're not mafresh challah. Only when you have a minimum amount of flour or more that you use for the dough are you mechuyev to separate challah. We will see the shiur. We know the shiur is 43 eggs and I think a fifth of an egg, and that is anywhere is between 2.5 pounds and 5 pounds, which is why Pashat Halacha L'Maisha today, if you make a dough using less than 2.5 pounds of flour, you don't even separate challah. When you make a dough starting out with a package of 5 pounds of flour or more, you mafresh challah with a bracha. In between 2.5 and 5, we're mafresh challah, but we do not make a bracha. On Daf Pegim Lamed Beis, we're going to go back to the dinim of Eruvei Chatzeiros. Pictures will be necessary. When you have two Chatzeiros, one adjacent the other, that did not join together in a larger Eruv. Each Chatzer has their own Eruv. But there is a third area, and both of the Chatzeiros have access to this third area, which is adjacent to both. We had such a case a few daf ago when there was a wall separating two Chatzeiros, and the area on top of the wall is 4 tfachim or more, so it's not a makim ptur, it's really a reshus. So the din will be is that if both Chatzeiros have equal access to this third area and they did not join a Chatzer, then neither of them can take to this third area or carry from that third area to them. On the other hand, we also learned a few daf ago the concept that if this third area is easier accessible to one more than the other, we give it to the reshus to which it is easier accessible to. And we're going to have ganze scenarios playing out this principle. Okay, we left off on the Pei Beis Amid Beis. We left off on Pei Beis Amid Beis on the last line of the Amid. Guys, it's a very easy Gemara, but you have to, if you want to take a calculator, gesund to hate. I know my father in Gan Eden is laughing at me right now with the calculator, but let's chazer these dinim. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika says that when he gave the time of when Dalit Sa'in is bought with a seller, so we established that Mazin Shtei Su'udais is a loaf that is comprised of 6 eggs. One loaf of 6 eggs is Mazin Shtei Su'udais. And therefore the Mishnah went further, that when we speak about a din of a pras, achilas pras, and the example the Mishnah gave was, the din was Beis Hamenuga, Chatzia leBeis Hamenuga, which means that when you enter a house that's afflicted with tzoras, the person who enters immediately becomes tamei. However, for the person's bigadim that he is wearing, for them also to become tamei, you have to linger a little bit in the house. How long do you have to stay in the house for your bigadim also to become tamei? The time that it takes to eat a pras. What's that pras? Now, since according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika, the entire loaf, mazon shtei su'udais, is 6 eggs, so a pras is 3 eggs. Then the Mishnah says, "V'chatzi chatzia," reading the last line in the Amid, "Chatzi chatzia lepsulas hagevia midrabanan." If someone eats foods that are tamei, the person himself or herself becomes tamei on a level of a sheni, which is why if they will touch truma, they will make the truma puzzle, they will invalidate the truma. How much of food that's tamei do you need to eat in order for you to become tamei midrabanan? That is a half of a half. That will be, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika, 1.5 egg. If you eat less than the volume of 1.5 eggs, even if you're eating food that's tamei, you b'chlal don't become tamei. Now let's go through the same numbers according to the Tanach Rab Shimon. As we explained, Rab Shimon held that a 1 loaf, which is mazin shtei su'udais, is a volume of 8 eggs. Now let's do the same thing again. So since he holds that it's a larger shiur, people eat more. Again, mazin shtei su'udais is 1 loaf of 8 eggs. So the din of chatzia lebeis hamenuga, how large does that loaf of bread have to be? Or how much time do you have to linger in the house to eat a half? That's a longer shiur. Half of 8 is 4 eggs. Chatzi chatzia of food that's tamei that you eat that passes your body midrabanan, according to the Tanach Rab Shimon, is 2 eggs. Okay, so now Daf Pei Gimel Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Shar Kol Nivei Dvarei. Our Mishnah stopped over there. A full loaf, the din of achilas pras, and we're familiar with achilas pras from many other areas as well. We gave one example. Then the Mishnah introduced a half of a half. You know what says the Gemara? There's a Braisa that gives us an halacha that adds another half. Tana v'chatzi chatzi chetzia. There is one area in halacha that is contingent on a half of a half of a half of the loaf. And what is that? Gewaldig letame tumas oicholin. Lekula alma, for food to be able to impart tuma. Now there's many other rules. A rishon can only make a sheni. A sheni can only make truma or kachim into a shlishi. We're not going to even review those laws right now. But just whenever it's shayach, because of the level of tuma, for food to impart tuma further, the food has to be of a minimum amount. How much is that? Again, we always say 1 egg. Now it's gavaldik. Now you'll see that's only Rab Shimon. We were up to, as we just spoke, according to Rabbi Yechanan ben Broika, the chatzi chetzia l'psulas hagevia was 1.5 eggs. According to Rabbi Yechanan ben Broika, a half of that is the food needed to passel to be metama tumas echolin. What is half of 1.5? 3/4, 0.75. Look inside the top Rashi. The chatzi chetzia l'tamei tumas echolin. Rabbi Yechanan ben Broika kede islay, and the hainu kebeya chatzer revia. So whenever we speak about you need to have one egg volume of food to be metame, that's only according to Rab Shimon. According to Rabbi Yechanan ben Broika, it's half of 1.5. Now according to Rabbi Yechanan ben Broika, it's perfect because we were up to attack 2 eggs, because it's 8 eggs. Mazin shtei seudas. That's the din of our ERUVIN, 8 of tchumen, or the sum total of 8 of chatzedas, right? Mazon shtei seudas, according to him, is 8 eggs. Pras is 4 eggs. Pras for base hamenuga. Lifsoilas hagavia is 2 eggs. Half of 2 eggs is 1 egg. So it's a machloikas tanoim. Now the Gemara has a gutakasha. Since we have an halacha, an area where we have to know the shiur, not only of the full loaf for our dinner, of half base hamenuga, of half, l'psulas hagavia, but of half of the half, for the din of being mitame tumas echolin. Why didn't our Mishnah mention that shiur as well? Second line in the Amid, the Tana didon my tama loitane tumas echolin. Answers the Gemara, because it's not exactly a half of a half of a half. Mishum de loishavu shiurayu lahadadi. The quantities are not in precise proportion of each other. It's more or less a half of a half of a half, and we're going to quote, it's little differences, but there are differences of various tanoim. Not according to one will it be exactly a half of a half of a half. Okay, so let's read it inside. V'tanya kamashir chatzi pras. This is, guys, chatzi pras. That's l'psulas hagavia. So this braisa will follow b'chlal the shita of Rab Shimon. It will not follow the shita of Rabbi Yechanan ben Broika. So we already explained it's 2 eggs, but the braisa goes into nuances. Nish genoi 2 eggs. It's either 2 eggs chaser kima. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda had a mesoira that it's not exactly half of the half of the half. It's not exactly half of the half. It's a little bit less. That's a chumrah. Rabbi Yossi also has a tradition that it's not exactly a half of a pras, but according to him, it's lekula. Not exactly beis beitzim shoichakois. Shoichakois means it's large. Remember, we had by the tfachim, even by the tfachim, whether you have 5 tfachim in an amma or 6 tfachim in an amma, there themselves, we had whether you squeeze your fist tight, whether you leave your fingers loose. So here we're having the same concept, either of a smaller egg a little bit, or you have to add a little bit to the volume of the eggs. That's second sheet. Now we're going to learn another sheet. Shiur Rebbe beis beitzim ba'oid. Rebbe, as we'll speak out in a moment, he was measured. He measured the sa'ah measurement in his life. And as we mentioned, guys, let's go again to these numbers. That 1 kav l'kula alma is the volume of 24 eggs. Since 1 sa'ah are 6 kavim, right? So 6 times 24 is 144. And indeed, in the Midbar, a sa'ah was a measure that had the volume of 144 eggs. I'll speak it out right now by heart. As time went on, there was inflation. And what they did is that they made the shiurim a little bit larger. They didn't change the name of the sa'ah, but you understand, when there's inflation, in other words, the food, you're getting geld you want to add, since you were paying more money for the saw, you were paying more money, inflation, but they wanted to equalize it by you need to get more food. They balanced it out by largering the measures. So you were paying more money for a saw, but you got a little bit more. The most Chazal allowed us to change a measure is the sixth. We learned this many times. A halachic sixth is not what you would think is a sixth. Whenever you hear the word shtus, which is a sixth, it's called a shtus milabar. The way we cheshbon a shtus milabar, whatever your number you're at. Now we're using the number that a saw has to hold 144 eggs, volume of eggs. Take 144, divide it by 5, and add that amount. And we're going to go through the exact number later, but that adds up to approximately 173 eggs. At a later point, Nachamol, they added the measurements. They did this twice. And when you went from 173 divided by 5, add that chelik, now you have a sixth. The number was 207. So it should have been in the times of Mishnahs and the times of Rebbe that a saw should hold 207 eggs. Rebbe measured the saw of his times, and his saw measured 217 eggs. And how did you get to that number? So Rebbe understood that shiur Rebbe beis beitzim va'oid, that you have to add a little bit to each egg. And how much was that va'oid? 1 of 20. A 20th will show how the 20th indeed will get you from 207 to 217. So coming back over here, Rebbe sides with Rabbi Yossi. This all based on Rab Shimon. No, it's Bechlal. The shit is. We're going now to Chatzi Pras. I'm sorry, before Chatzi Pras based on Rab Shimon. It's 2 eggs, but it's not exactly 2 eggs. Faket, you need to have. It's a kula. You need to have more time. You have to be able to eat 2 big eggs or 2 eggs plus a 20th on top of that. Okay, so first of all, the 2 eggs of the Chatzi Pras are either a little bit less or a little bit more. And let's go further. All based on Rab Shimon. According to Rabbi Yechanan ben Broika, we just said Tumasei Cholin is 0.75. According to Rab Shimon, that the shir is around 1 egg. It's not exactly an egg. Tanya, we learned Machlekes Tanoim. Rab Nosson and Rab Doisi Amru, Kebeitza Sho Amru, that's Rab Shimon. It's Kamoya Uche Kilipasa. It's when you have the egg with its klipa. The Chachamim say, no, it's the egg without the klipa. Sai according to Rab Nosson and Rab Doisa. Sai according to the Chachamim. Whether you go like Rabbi Yehuda, whether you're going to go like Rabbi Yossi, whether you're going to go like Rebbe, the first steps were exact. So according to Rabbi Yechanan ben Broika, a half a kav, mazon shtei seudis, is 6 eggs. So Chatzi Pras is 3 eggs, not more or less, exactly. Or according to Rab Shimon, 8 eggs, 4 eggs. The moment you start going down, and when you go from 4 to 2, already you see that the 2 is not exact. But then when you go from the not exact 2 down another step, even down the other step, you have nacham achloikas, whether it is with the klipa, whether it is without the klipa. So it's not exactly half of the one before it. So that's the answer why our Mishnah didn't mention it. But we should know that the shir of Tumasei Cholin is chatzi, chetzio. I'm talking to myself. So every time we chazir, it's 1 egg. It's not exactly 1 egg. And you have a machlekes itself. You have a machlekes itself, whether it is with the klipa or without a klipa, but you're not beginning with 2 eggs. You are beginning with a machlekes tanoim, whether it's little eggs, whether it's larger eggs, whether you have to add a 20th to the egg. None of it is precise. So our Tana didn't mention it. Okay. Amar Rav Amar Papa Amar Rab Chizda. Zu divrei Rabbi Yehuda veRabbi Yossi. Avo chachamim oimrim kebeya u'mechza sheichakos. That when we're speaking about the shir lipsoilas hagaviyah, guys, we're all following the shita of Rab Shimon, and we said, what will that be? That will be 2 eggs. That's only according to Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. The Chachamim hold an egg and a half, kebeitza umechza, an egg and a half, and they have to be sheichakos. Now, okay, I know that detail of sheichakos, as we see, it's not exact, but where do you get the 1.5 from? So now we figured it out. Because if we're starting with 6 eggs and the pras is 3 eggs, So lifsa l'sagaviyah, half of that is an egg and a half. Pshita, we know that according to our Rabbi Yochanan and Broik in the Mishnah, we're going to come to the Mishnah already said, a chatzi chetzia, lifsa l'sagaviyah, 1.5? No, says the Gemara, shechekais asal ashmeinan, as we mentioned, l'kula alma, the moment you come to lifsa l'sagaviyah, it's not exact. It's already either a little bit larger, a little bit smaller, or again, like we have Shitas Rebbe, he added a 20th to the volume of the eggs. Now we're going to go more into this Rebbe shiur. Kiyasad Avdimi. When Avdimi came from Eretz Yisrael, he said the following, that I remember when Shiger Boiniyois is the name of a person. He sent to Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Moidia means a measure, the Kundis is a saw. He sent him the physical holder that was the measure of a saw, that came from the city, that's one girsa, the min neusa. Rebbe took it, and Vishia Rebbe, that how many eggs fit in it, Masan ushva esrei beyan, 217 eggs. And like we're going to read it inside what we spoke out before. We know that we began with 144 eggs. That was in the times of the Midbar. The next time that we made the measurement larger to counter inflation, those measurements were called Yerushalmis. At a later time, again, they added the measures, and they are called Tzipoides. And every time, the max we can add is a halachic sixth. And the problem will be, it should never have gotten to such a large measure. Hold on, what? Sa'a is this following. If what Rebbe was measuring was something that was built to be exact the size of the saw at the times of the Midbar, that we can be. No one is debating this statement. Kuf mem dalat havia. Pashut. 1 sa'a is 6 kav. My friends, 1 kav, there's no one debating all this. 1 kav is 12 eggs. No one is debating that. So if one is, in other words, if 1 kav is 12, then 1 saw is going to be 144. I'm sorry, 1 kav is 12 eggs. Exactly. And we begin with 120, with 144. Now, when they went from the 144, they added the shtus. Idi Yerushalmis, how do you add a sixth, a halachic sixth? You take the 144, you divide it by 5, and the answer is 28.8. Add 28.8 on 144, you have 172.8. They rounded it off, Kuf Ayin Gimel Hava. And then when they added the third time, they added the second time, but this is the third shiur of a saw, Idit Zipoides. So they added again a shtus. So they began with 173. 173 divided by 5 is 34.6. They added 34.6 on top of 173. So that's 207.6. They rounded it off to 207. Reish Zayin Hava. So how did they come to a saw that was measured 217? Says the Gemara, Lo Olam, the first attempt is the Tzipoides. They were beginning with the latest large measure, 207. However, this way as I see, but Chalso Shadi Elyahu, they made in that village, in that place, Nuasa, they made the saw even bigger. Why? Because since we're obligated to separate challah, they wanted to have a shiur that even after you separated the challah, you remain with the 207. The problem is going to be that we're going to make the cheshbon right now, that even if you want to make a measure that can hold the latest saw volume, plus the challah that you have to take from it, it's not going to come to 217. How much challah do you have to separate? This is bisman that challah is midoiraisa. We're not speaking about a baker that gets 148, but a balabais has to take 1 of 24. So guys, who knows the math over here? How many eggs do you have if you're starting with 207? So it's going to be the fractions we will not count. 192 divided by 24, because you have to take off 1/24 is 8 eggs. Now I know we really have 207, and there's 15 between 194 and 207, but 15 is not a full egg. So we're not counting fractions of eggs. So there's 8. Okay, so take 207 and add 8. How much do you have? 215, not 217. Come on, it's still not enough to get to 217. If that was the reason, Ella, forget about the challah. No one added the challah in the saw itself. You took off from the saw challah. You took off 24%, 1 of 24. Ella, as we learned before, that shiur Rebbe, Beis ve'oid, we're calling the ve'oid ve'oidos. The ve'oidos of Rebbe you have to throw on it. What's Rebbe, because the eggs were so shoichakos, he added 20. So what you do is 20th, you take 207, you divide it by 20. How much is 207 divided by 20? 10.35. Forget about the 0.35, right? You have 207 plus 10 is 217. Well, if that's the case, if you add the 20th of Rebbe, have a late tfei, it should have been 217.35. So the Gemara says that's not a kasha. So that now we figure that out. Now we also understand when shiur Rebbe Beis and V'oid, that's what it means. It means that not only was he using the tzipoidis saw a measure, but he added on top of that an additional 20th of the volume, and that was the latest saw shiur. Tana Rabbanan, saw Yerushalmis is larger than the midbaris, a sixth, a halachic sixth, like we mentioned. You start with 144. How do you add a sixth? By dividing 144 by 5. That's 28.8. You throw that on top of the 144 and you come to 172.8, and it's rounded off, like we said, to 173. Vishel Tzipoidis, again, you say to Al Yerushalmi Shtus, they made the same cheshbon. You take 173 divided by 5 is 34.6. You add 34.6 on top of 173, you have 207.6. So Nim says, now these words are enigmatic. So it comes out that Shel Tzipoidis is Yiseda al Midbaris Shlish. So it comes out that the Tzipoidis is larger, the last year, the 207 is bigger than the Midbaris 144 by a third. No, it's not a third. Can't mean literally. Ilema, that you take a third of the midbaris. In other words, you take 144, you divide it by 3. How much is 144 by 3? Who knows? 48. 48. Well, if you take 48 and you put it on top of 144, you come to 192, not the 207. If that's what it means, however, the ilu oitva, if you want to know the difference between the original saw, 144, and the tzipoidis saw, which is 207, how much is 207 minus 144? 63, not 48, 63. Shaitanut las. So that doesn't work. Ella, maybe it means, the Braisa means a third of the Yerushalmis. Let's take a third of 173. Doesn't work either. We already established that the difference between the earliest saw and the latest saw is 63. The difference between 207 and 144 is 63. Fine. Now, if you're going to take the Yerushalmis, which is 173, and take a third of it, how much is a third of 173? Shlish dida kama haven. So the Gemara says, well, if you divide 173 into 3, you have chamshin v'tamya nechi tilsa. You have 57.66666. Okay? Or the way the Gemara calls it, you have 58 minus a third. Again, 58 minus a third, not 63. So what does it mean by the third? It must be that you take a third from the tzipoidi. Doesn't work either. Because how much is a third of 207? 207 divided by 3 is 69. Or in B'lashon Chazal, 70 minus 1. And we just said again that the difference between 207 and 144 is 63, not 69. All of this is to understand the end of this Braisa that says, Nimtzeis shel tzipoidis yiseda al midbariyos shlish. What shlish? From whom is the shlish? So it says the Gemara, Elo amar Rabbi Yirmiyah hachi ka'amar. Nimtzeis. Now that we said that they made 2 additions. So we have a total of 3 measurements: the original sa'ah, the sa'ah Yerushalmis, the Shatzi Poiris. And each one was never made more than a sixth. 144, 173, 207. Let's put aside that Rebbe is unique. But these are the 3 measurements. So he says that Yeseda al Midbariyas, that the lattice one, the Tzipoide, the 207 volume of eggs, is larger than the original Midbaris, which is 144. We already said 63. He says, Karoiv lishlish shalom. Yes, Karoiv lishlish shalom. Because 207 divided by 3 is 69. What's the difference between the latest saw and the earliest saw? 63. Karoiv. Now he adds a line. Right now we didn't need it, but you'll see why we need this in a moment on this Amid still. And he adds another detail, which is vital enigmatic. V'shlish shalah, which is 69. This 69, which is a third of 207, is karayv lemechze. It's near the number of half of the midbariyas. The midbariyas is 144. Half of 144 is 72. 69 is close to 72. Why is that needed when the Braisa doesn't say it? Again, we'll see in a moment. Point. So his solution was that it's not exact. It's karayv. Now, guys, karayv, we are Chazal round off fractions. That we get, right? We learned pi in Chazal is a third. It's not a third. It's 3.14 machneshois. But when you have the emes, number is the difference between the first and the lattice. The first and the lattice is 63. The difference between 207 and 144 is 63. For us to give a number of 69, why did we need it? But that's not okay. That's not called close. It's the Gemara calls it, it's close to the close. That's how far you're getting. So the Gemara, it's so off mark. When something is so off mark, you can't say it's near. It's near what would have been near. Like, not only why do we need it, it's not shaykh, it's too big of a doichik. It's too big of a gap between 63 and 69. El Amar Avina, 3 lines from the bottom, Hachika Amar, Nimtzeis, it comes out that now that we established, again, that it went from Midbaris to Yerushalmis to Tzipoiris. And every time they added it, only a shtus, the way we explained Yocheshbin, the 6th, the halachic 6th, is what we would call a 5th. So we made the numbers, we come to 207, so the Braisa is concluding, Nimtzeis, Shlish Shel Tzipoiri. Now, Beve'idiyos, and the Ve'oid of Rebbe. Rebbe had a whole different way of measuring it. Rebbe saw that the saw is 217, which means you have to add another 20th. Oh. So 217 divided by 3 is 72. 72.33. Now we get the whole cheshbon. So a third, not of the 207, a third of the times of the Mishnayos, they already had it bigger than 217. The is Yetzera al Mechza Shel Midbariyas, only a Shlish Beitza. Half of the Midbariyas, now you see why we need a half. The Midbariyas is 144. 144 divided by 2 is 72. Gewaldig. A third of the real latest shiur, the updated shiur, the most inflated shiur is 217. A third of that is 72.33. Fractions we approximate. So aside of the 0.33, aside of the third, a third of the latest, now you'll get, is the half, a third of the latest is half of the original. That's pshat inflation. You think it's just a little bit. Before you give a krich, you understand, a third is at mamish as large as the half, taking off the 0.33. Gewaldig. Hope that was good. That was fun. Now we're going on. Now you don't have to know all these numbers anymore. Tanach Rabbanan, the last line in the Amud. This Gemara is so negei halacha l'mais. And we're speaking about a sa'ah. And again, we're beginning with the 144. A sa'ah in the times of Moshe Rabbeinu had held the volume of 144 eggs. So Tanach Rabbanan, when it says in Parsha Shlach, Reishis Arisoy Seichem, the first of your doughs, right? Chalot Rima Truma. Now the Torah could have written the first of dough. Why your dough? The your dough that Pei Gimel Amid Beis says the Gemara, right? Says the Braisa, We already know how large was our dough. And that was the diuk over here, that you only separate challah when the dough is like your dough. And the Gemara says, okay, v'kama arisoy seichem. We're now dough, well, not exactly dough, but we were getting the manna. And the Torah prescribes the exact volume of the manna. Kedei isas hamidbar. It's only when we make a dough from the 5 grains that has the same volume shiur of our dough, meaning of our food, the shiur that we got every day in the manna. Bamidbar, only then are we obligated to separate challah. Now, v'kama isas hamidbar, it's a pasuk. Guys, 1 ephah is 3 saw. Finished. We already know now everything. Because in other words, 3 saw, if 1 saw is 6 kav, 3 saw is 18 kav. That's 432 egg volume. Push it. And from that, the Torah says a tenth of it was our dough. A tenth of 432 is 43.2 or 43 1/5 eggs. That is the shiur. Only from then on are you mechuyev to separate challah. Let's just add another measurement. It's not going to change anything, but 1 roiva, if a kav is 24, which it is, so a quarter of a kav is 6 eggs. So says the Braisa that the mikan omru, this is all the Braisa talking, 7 quarters, right? Again, 1 quarter is 6 eggs. So 7 quarters, ve'oid, that's the 43.2, is when you're chayav challah. Now, once we already established that when inflation kicked in at 2 points in our history, up until the times of the Mishnayos, we added the size of the measures because you're paying more money. So to counter it, you should be getting more food. And every time they only added the size in a halachic sixth. So now, if we're using the quarter of a kav is 6 eggs. So 7 revoyim in the times of the midbar held 43.2. But then when they made in Yerushalayim, when they added the size of those measures by a 6th, so now 6 roivas of Yerushalmis will hold the same 43.2, and then when they added again shehem hey shaltzi plati at the last time before the Mishnayos were written down, when they added for the second time, so now we have the 3rd measure of a roiva. Every time they only were allowed to make it larger, a halachic 6th. So it was 5 roivas. Not make the bidiyuk. It's always going to be the same amount of eggs. It's 43.2. It's 43 eggs and 2/5 of an egg. And only then are you chayiv to separate challah. The poyel mamish, guys, this is very much negeya of a famous tshuva, and we should know this, of the Noide Yehuda, that claims that the eggs in the times of the midbar were substantially, chicken eggs, substantially larger than our eggs right now. He proves that there needed to be a certain change in nature, and the other solution will be that the human body, the etzba, changed, and he completely negates that there was a substantial change in the size of human beings. He does hold that certain products did change. You know, it's the whole sugya, Danny, of the olive, whether the shiur of a kizayis, whether the olives were larger or not. The Noide Yehuda explicitly paskins that the eggs were larger. Because of that, he writes double. So that's how we go by poil mamish, that between 2.5 pounds of flour from any of the 5 grains until 5 pounds of flour, that's double. That is where we have today a doubt whether you're mechuyev to separate challah or not. So if any of us or our spouses or our children, if we make any dough, not a batter, that's another thing. If it's a batter, you don't separate challah. A batter is something that you pour. Dough is something that's, you can't pour out, you got to take out. We separate challah on a bracha, without a bracha. The moment you're going to use a whole packet, today when you go to Smart and Final, a packet of flour is 5 pounds. It's perfect. If you use that, then you're going to take off challah with a bracha, even though, don't forget, challah is manazeh, chutz la'aretz is a double derabanan. We are obligated to separate challah. Now that we came to this 43.2 eggs, 43 eggs and 2/5 of an egg, so there's something else connected to it. Mikan amru ha'oichel kemidazu. a person, how much food should a person eat each day? So you can argue nuances, depends how big you are. We're having a general statement. Since God gave us in the Midbar, to every Yid, He gave us the Asira So'efa, the 43.2 eggs. This is the optimum amount of total food you should eat every day. And Ho'echel Kemidazu, Hadei body. First of all, that person will be healthy and he'll be blessed. Why will he be blessed? Because that is the exercise of moderation. Moderation means not to eat too little and not to eat too much. And a person who's able to practice moderation, we're speaking about quantities of food, that's where the bracha shuruya on the moderate path. Yes, it al-kain, if you eat more than that, you're an Hassan, you're considered someone who's already gluttonous or glutinous. We'll see Sundani's face which one is correct. And pachas mikan, mekulkal, if you have less than 43.2, then you're mekulkal b'me'av, there's a defect. Something right now is if you eat less because what? You're praving his kafya, that's something else. But if you're eating less because you can't eat more, that's an indication, a simon of health is when you have a healthy appetite. People who are God forbid.
What if you're doing intermittent fasting? To be healthy.
Fasting has nothing to do with this because you can eat within the 6 hours of intermittent fasting. You can eat the shiur of the asira so'efa and just chaparayna every 24 hours. Chaparayna
and Rabbi, just to be clear, it doesn't mean actual eggs. That would be a lot of cholesterol.
Volume of eggs. Keep on saying volume of eggs. Very good point. Okay. All right, Chavra, that was amazing. Now we're coming back to ERUVIN. Now the theme we already learned above, as we spoke out, that whenever you have two chatzeros adjacent to each other, if they are obligated to join with an eruv, then they have to join with an eruv. But we began even with chaloin, the previous pedic, that you can have two chatzeros, that they are adjacent to the other. There is a window or a door connecting one with the other, a halachic window or a door. If they want, they can be ma'arav echad, but if they want, they can be ma'arav shtayim. In the case where they were ma'arav shtayim, every chatzan made their own eruv. But there is a third area that's adjacent to both. Chatzar Aleph, Chatzar Beis, and an area we're going to call Gimel. We'll see. Before it was the top of the wall. Maybe it's going to be a ditch. Maybe it's going to be a platform. It's going to be an area that's adjacent both to Aleph and to Beis. Now, since Aleph and Beis, Shloimeh did not make an eruv together, in that case, if area Gimel is 4 by 4 tvachim or more, leave that picture up, 4 by 4 tvachim or more. In other words, it's a reshus b'fnei atzma. It's not a makom ptur. So what's the din? So the rule, this is one rule, and a lot will, God willing, learn tomorrow, but you have to get this rule. If both areas have the same access to area 3, same access means it's either equally easy to get there or equally difficult. One answers the other. Now, if something is already there, that we learned in the Mishnah before, like the food on top of the wall, gesund heit, we're speaking about carrying from area Gimel to Chatzar Aleph or to Chatzar Beis, or from Aleph to that area or from Beis to that area. Can't. But the moment Chazal will establish that this area 3, this area Gimel, is easier accessible to one over the other, even though these two did not make an eruv, we give it to the area which has easier access. This is the principle from which we're going to learn a whole smorgasbord gavaldik of cases. Says the Mishnah. The example we are giving, whoever is looking at pictures are very helpful, but if not, we'll do the best to describe it. It was common that people had larger buildings. There was a downstairs and an upstairs. Many families lived in the downstairs. It was an apartment building, what we would call apartment building. Many families lived upstairs. The way members of the upstairs, they didn't go directly downstairs. There was what we call a mirpeses. You can call that a porch. There was an area that members of the upstairs first went into, as you can see in the pic. Now, even though in the picture there is a ladder from the windows upstairs to the mirpeses, that is really going to be subject to what we'll learn tomorrow, because there is another option, which will be different. What's going to happen if to go out to the mirpeses, you don't even need a ladder? Which one the Mishnah is speaking about is not clear. We'll leave it unclear. Not again. You use the picture, Seder. So one thing is clear. If the members upstairs only made an eruv with themselves, everyone can go to the merpeses. They were ma'arav together. It's the common area servicing upstairs. Another detail. If you remember the din of Rabbi Akiva af Ayin Hey, not Rabbi Akiva, Chachamim, that the regel hamuteres b'mekoyma eino yiseres shaloi b'mekoyma. The fact that the members upstairs that first go on the merpeses, but then to go out to the street, they have to go through the downstairs chutzner. They walk through it. They have the right of easement. They have the drisas regel rights, right? However you say this in English, the easements rights. Since they are allowed to carry on the merpeses, lechachamim, their permissibility to walk through the chutzner, and they did not join with the chutzner, is not a problem. Regel hamuteres b'mekoyma eino yiseres shaloi b'mekoyma. Clear. The chutzner downstairs, who made an eruv? Who made an eruv? The members of the downstairs chutzner. So at kan, what are we saying? We're saying that the merpeses belongs to the upstairs and the chutzner belongs to the downstairs. Let's start with that. Anshe chutzner, va'anshe merpeses, sheshachachu v'lo eruv. They forgot and they did not make an eruv. Guys, forgetting and not making an eruv does not mean that no eruv was made. No. That's called they didn't make an eruv. Forgot means, when you forget, when you remember something and then you forget it, that's called forgetting. If you don't know, they made an eruv with themselves. The downstairs neighbors made an eruv with themselves. They can carry to the outstairs chutzner. And again, the fact that the bnei Aliyah go through their chutzner doesn't bother us because it's regel hamuteres b'mekoyma. They forgot because Chaval, you already made an eruv downstairs for downstairs and upstairs for upstairs. Why not make the next step? And then everyone can carry anywhere. They didn't do that step. Like kol shegavoya yutfachim, any other area. There was no picture of this yet. If there is a third area, you're going to see tomorrow, if there's a platform on the chutzner, on the ground on the chutzner, but it goes high. If it's higher 10 tfachim off the ground, which means that it's not easily accessible to the downstairs people, then we give it to the merpeses. Now, how close is it to the merpeses? The Mishnah doesn't say. That's where the Gemara is going to have to come in. Likewise, pachos mikan, but if it's within 10 tfachim of the ground, again, the Mishnah is not saying here, Rabbeinu HaKadosh wants us to schwitz, yigia, but if it's close to the chutzner, easier accessible to the chutzner, then we give it to the chutzner. Similarly, another similar case, if you have either a chulias haboy, that means that there is a hole in the ground in the chutzner, but when you dig a hole, you have to take out earth. It was common that they would make an embankment, which means that they would put the earth, this picture we don't need yet. They're going to put the earth around the chulia, all right? So chulias habar, the chulia means the embankment. So therefore, there is a mound around the hole. Or you have a cellar, or you have a stone. The point is there is something on the chutzner that's going upwards. Gavoyim asara tfachim. If it's 10 tfachim or more off the ground of the chutzner. Okay, in other words, we're giving a detail now. What is this adding? We'll see tomorrow. The Mishnah already said kol shegavoya, but we're giving an example. Then since it's 10 tfachim or more above the ground of the chutzner, making it relatively difficult for the bnei chutzner to use it, so then you give it to the merpeses. But if pachas mikan, but again, if it's a mound, but it's within 10 tfachim, it's lower than 10 tfachim from the ground of the chutzner, then it goes to the chutzner. Point B, if it would be easily accessible to both, or it would be equally difficult for both, then neither of them, you can walk there, but neither of them would be allowed to carry from there to shus into that area. That because, let's say, it's above 10 tfachim, you give it to the merpeses, that's only besmucha. Because it's easier taka to the merpeses. That's the meaning of the Mishnah. Aval b'mufleges, but if it is not near the merpeses, even though gavoya yutfachim, even though it's 10 tfachim off the ground, you give it to the chutzner. That nuances, the details. this will be a case where it's easier l'bnei chatzir to get there versus to the anshe mirpesas. Ve'ezi smucha. Again, this picture is not negeh for right now. Ve'ezi smucha kol she'ena rochoika arba tvachim. Once the moment it's 4 tvachim or more, that's already called mufleges, and people of the mirpesas will hesitate to go there because even though you're walking, even if it's on your same height, there's a crack in the ground 4 tvachim or more. We had that also above. They're not going to go there, and Chazal deemed it easier, accessible to the anshe yachatzir. Okay, so now the Gemara speaks out all of the klalim that we used. Pshita, clear. If it's lezeb b'pesach or lezeb b'pesach, there is a third area. Now the Mishnah speaks about anshe chatzir, anshe mirpesas. The Gemara doesn't even have to speak about such a scenario. That was the beauty of the picture that was just taken down. You can have 2 chatzeros, one on the side of the other. And again, it's a case either they were not allowed to be ma'arif together because there was no window, or leave that picture up, or they could have been ma'arif together, but they didn't. Doesn't make a difference. And now we're focusing on a third area. In the picture, it's this block. You see, it's not higher than the ground, it's aligned, or whatever it is, it's the zel b'zach. So lezeb Pesach, if getting to the third area is easy, Pesach is just an example where there's an opening. That is the din that we had on Ayin Vav in the Mishnah regarding the chaloin shebein beis chatzeiros. That what? That neither of them can carry. Since each side has equal access, if there's food on the wall, they can both eat, but neither were allowed to be ma'alim. Likewise, that's if it's easy to each one. What about lezeb zrika? Zrika in our sugya will refer to an upward movement. Remember that, because when we're speaking about 2 areas that are not aligned, one is higher, one is lower. If we're speaking about the bnei chatzir, they're the center here. If going to the third area means they have to go up, it's called zrika. If they have to go down, it's called shilshul. That's going to be the lashonos of our Gemara. So lezeb zrika, and zrika, my friends, means 10 tefachim or more. Less than 10 tefachim is called Pesach. Less than 10 tefachim is like a big step. So then that is the case of the koisel shebein beis chatzeiros, that it's forbidden to be malin on the wall. Exactly. When I mentioned before, lezeb Pesach, it's not the top of the wall because the top of the wall of the Mishnah was taka 10 tefachim. It's hard to get there. Equally easy, aser. Equally hard, aser. Lezeb shilshul. Shilshul means you have to lower things down. But again, there's a crevice, there's an area to get to it. You have to go 10 tefachim or more. That's the picture over here. Again, Hainu, that's the case that we learned later in the Gemara on the Mishnah of Daf Ayin Vav, but the Gemara spoke out chiritz shebein beis chatzeiros, or the Mishnah of Daf Ayin Ches Amud Beis, that it's forbidden for both. Likewise, if it's easier for one to the other, lezeb Pesach or lezeb zrika. To one side, it's easy. To one side, it's difficult. That was the case we had from Rabba, Barafuna, Amarav Nachman, where there was a wall. Remember that case? But one chatzir from their ground to the top of the wall is less than 10 tefachim. The Gemara used the lashon, it was equal to the ground. We spoke on it, not equal to the ground. It doesn't have to be that way. To the other side, from their ground to the top of the wall is 10 tefachim or more. So what did we learn? Rabba Barafuna said, we give it to the chatzir who has easier access to this third area. Likewise, and that the case that the Rabba gave was with the wall. Likewise, lezeb Pesach or lezeb shilshul, to one side it's relatively leveled, exactly leveled with the door or within 10 tefachim. It's called level. To the other one, they have to go down. Shilshul means a downward motion. That was also a case that we had in that sugya, spoken out by Rav Shivzri, Omar Rav Nachman, that it's given to whom? It's given to the chatzir. Very good. You have all the pictures here. That it's given to the one that passes. Now, the question that we have, the Rav Shivzri period, Omar Rav Nachman, he introduces the kasha. This will be the machlokes, the final thing we'll learn today. Here in the Gemara, lezeb shilshul or lezeb zrika. What happens if there's a third area that's in between 2 chatzeiros, but it's an area where from one side going into it, you have to go down. From the other chatzir going into it, you go up. Are they equal? Or if it's between up or down, Shmuel, down is easier. So Amarav, Shnei Masurim. Shmuel Amar, no. Going down is considered an easier movement. We all know that. It's easier. Doesn't mean it's better, God forbid, to go down, but it's easier to fall down, and therefore it's called tashmishtoi benachas, and that's the klal. Shalozeh tashmishtoi benachas, because they have to just go down. Now, taking it from there up, no, but we're speaking about your beginning from your chatzid, ulezeh tashmishtoi bekasha, and the rule is v'chol davar shetashmishtoi lezeh benachas, lezeh bekasha.
Rabbi, even when they're not equal, meaning like if it's a bigger distance to go down and shorter to go up, then what's the case?
Okay, very good. So that is just to point out that we are using the 10 tefachim as the boundary. So if going down, let's say, is 30 tefachim, going up is exactly 10 tefachim, Shmuel will not change his opinion. Which once you have to make an effort of being zoidik or being mishalshel, we don't have any other shiurim once we hit the 10th tefachim. I will stop over here. I know we could get a little bit more, but it's Mama's going to leave it too much in the middle. Now we cleared. The Mishnah was a little bit vague. We're going to use our Mishnah to try to clarify or refute Shitas Rav and Shitas Shmuel, God willing, to be continued.
So Rabbi, just the original case of the Mishnah,
yeah.
If the chaloin is mamish lined up, you don't even have to step at all, right? But the chutzner is less than 10 tvachim. So are we understanding right now that that's considered equal?
Yeah. So if there's a chaloin, and guys, one thing is important. Let's speak about the windowsill. The windowsill is something we never learned about on Daf Ayin Vav. We did where we spoke on top of the wall. A windowsill is common. Chaloin shebei shnei chatzeros. If the area of the windowsill is a makim ptur, that's a whole different topic. But if it is 4 tefachim, then no chatzir is allowed to use the area of the windowsill. That's exactly what we're learning. But if the windowsill from one chatzir is above 10 tefachim, and from the other it's less than 10 tefachim, we also learned that above. Then noisnen oisnoi to the one shetashmishoy benachas. It's a simple cloud. If both chatzeros made an eruv chatzeros together, then there's nothing to talk about. Then obviously all of them can carry in and from that third area. We're speaking about sheshak chu v'lo eruv. That's the case of our Mishnah, and that's the machlokes between Av and Shmuel. Good.
Rabbi.
Shkoyach.